I have two Blorb decks in my collection so far. I've been trying to figure out what makes them tick, and it's been a challenge. The thing with Blorb is that Blorb cannot reap. So Blorb does not represent any value by itself, really. The value that it offers is taking a card off the top of your deck and being a 1-power creature to fight with. It's also in the house Mars, which likes having a lot of creatures. In the case with Blorb, Blorb provides so little value that usually the cards that are turned into Blorbs would have been better off being played as themselves. The value of having Blorbs comes from the synergies it has with the other cards in your deck. With this deck, Hijack or Chew, in general, I don't want to make Blorbs randomly. So I look at all the token generating cards in this deck, and it's pretty disappointing to think that I would have to discard all of these. But looking through each of the cards in this pile, there are reasons to play each of them. Mark II Generator is an artifact, and this reduces the amount of cards in your deck, so you play that. Iron X Propaganda has an amber bonus, so you want to play this. If you don't want to make more Blorbs, what you can do is put it on a Blorb, and it's not going to be able to reap to make more Blorbs, and it's not going to survive a fight to make another Blorb. So you can play it just for the amber bonus. Or if you're playing against a non-woe deck, you can just put it on an opponent's creature. Space Invaders is slightly different in that it makes tokens out of the creatures in your hand. So with this card, you can safely turn unimportant cards into tokens and get through your deck faster. Now with these two Saurian ones, Arm of the Plebeians does have an amber bonus, so if you value getting to check over perhaps tokenizing an important card in your deck, you can play that. But this deck does have two Phalanx Strikes. Phalanx Strike is more powerful the more creatures you have, so it can be worth it to make Blorbs to destroy important enemy creatures with the Phalanx Strikes. Now there is a key cheat in here with Token of Appreciation, so I imagine you can come up with situations where you can create just enough Blorbs at the right moment to forge a key. And finally we have the Blorb Hive, which is another artifact, which means that we can just play it, reduce the number of cards in our deck, and never use it if we don't want. So this deck only wants to make Blorbs strategically when it benefits it at the moment, because I think the deck is more successful when its key cards are not tokenized. This deck has a Memolith. It's really tempting to want to put Blorb generating cards underneath this and use this to make Blorbs, but I think it simply works better as a way to connect Trading Frenzy with Epic Poem. So this deck has two Trading Frenzies, and that means there's a pretty good chance that you'll be able to Memolith one of them, and that sets you up for the Epic Poem, because Trading Frenzy lets you capture 3 Ember onto a creature. So I think having Trading Frenzy underneath the Memolith to use its effects on the same turn you Epic Poem is a more consistent strategy than trying to forge keys with Blorb. Now this is the deck with the other grafter, the Infomancer and Mars, and in this case, we have 2 Phalanx Strikes. And I think the Phalanx Strikes can be used to improve the power of a Mars Needs Amber, potentially. Because I think Mars Needs Amber is the other important card in this deck. If I'm just tokenizing cards randomly, then I might lose my Mars Needs Amber or Epic Poem. Another important card I don't want to tokenize is Kaboom! Kaboom, one of my favorite cards from this set so far. Now I mentioned that Blorbs, they're Mars. Mars likes having Mars creatures out. Kaboom says that you put each Mars creature into its owner's archives. This means that what you've tokenized with Blorb becomes your archives. I think this is one of the best synergies you can have with Blorb. I mentioned that you wouldn't want to use the token generating cards unless you had an immediate reason to do so. And if you have Kaboom in your hand, then you can just go straight into making Blorbs, because whatever you turn into a Blorb is going to be archived. So between the Blorb Hive, Space Invaders, Iron X Propaganda, and the Mark II Generator, I could have 5+ Blorbs the turn I play Kaboom, which turns into an archive of 5 cards. If the Blorbs were already on the board, then I can selectively fight them off to control what goes into my archives. And another cool thing about this deck is it has this double enhanced Xanthix Harvester, which is another Mars card that gets archived by the Kaboom. So you can just play the Harvester and immediately Kaboom, so you have it in your archives to play later for more Amber. My other Blorb deck, I think, has more of an excuse to spam Blorbs as much as possible. For starters, it does have a feature booster, which lets you look at the top card and determine what becomes tokenized, so this can protect your important cards from turning into Blorbs sometimes. Here's its token generating package in Star Alliance. It has 2 Scout Chief Courtiers and a Gruntwork, and I'm throwing in the Navigator Ali in there because that's another way, like the feature booster, to control what gets tokenized. It also has this neat combo with Collector Borin to make a bunch of tokens in one turn, because there's an uplink, and you can use uplink to make tokens, and if you put uplink on Collector Borin, it's going to ready it. And there's a few other upgrades in Star Alliance, and so you can use Collector Borin multiple times in one turn and make a bunch of Blorbs with the uplink. And if you got things really set up, there's a CXO Tabor, and you can use that to play one of the other upgrades in Sanctum or Mars. It has more token generating in Mars, so we have the Blorb Hive. The Ironix Vatminder makes 2 Blorbs, so if you play Ironix Vatminder and destroy it with Blorb Hive, that's 4 Blorbs in one turn, along with a Clone Home and Ironix Banner. So this deck has a few ways of making a bunch of tokens. It also has creature protection for the Blorbs. So there's a Grey Abyss in here, which gives the Blorbs +1 armor. That makes them a little more survivable. So we have ways of controlling what turns into Blorbs. We have combos for creating lots of Blorbs in one turn. We have creature protection for the Blorbs. And we also have a few payoffs for having Blorbs. Mix the Tall-Minded will increase the opponent's key cost for each Blorb you have. Kaboom, as I mentioned earlier, is a way to make an archive with the Blorbs you have. Red Planet Raygun gets powered up when you have more Blorbs. And there's a membership drive, which actually gives you Amber for having Blorbs. Now, to be honest, I haven't had too much success with either of these decks yet. I have pulled off a Kaboom a few times, making a big archive with Blorbs, but overall the win rate is low. Still, it's been a lot of fun figuring out the different styles of these 2 decks. Do you have a strategic Blorb deck, or do you have a Blorb spam deck? Well, that's all for now. Happy Blorbing!